The question is, police received 1.14 billion kina funding from 2023 to 2024. How has this money been spent, Mr. Speaker? Is the Marape government serious about law and order? This money, 1.14 billion kina, could have completely transformed the Royal Papua New Guinea Constabulary and made Papua New Guinea a safer place to live and work. 1.14 billion kina in police funding has vaporized, Mr. Speaker. In 2024, Mr. Speaker, our debt to GDP ratio was 50.5%. For every kina in revenue generated, 50.5% of that money goes towards debt repayment. In 2025, this will be reduced to 47.4%, and we take note of the Treasurer's good work in amending the Fiscal Responsibilities Act. The high debt to GDP ratio will make it difficult to invest in our people, education, health, and infrastructure. Being over-leveraged, Mr. Speaker, will reduce our liquidity and make us less competitive. Mr. Speaker, I take the House to capital investment budget. The fundamental reason, honourable leaders, through you, Mr. Speaker, for debt financing should be to invest in infrastructure that will create jobs for our people and be a catalyst for economic development. This is where the capital investment budget is so important, and this is where it comes in. Mr. Speaker, in 2024, there is little information on what was not spent from the 7.6 billion capital investment budget, when the actual expenditure was 4.7 billion. So the difference, Mr. Speaker, of 2.9 billion kina of outstanding funding in the capital investment budget remains unexplained by the good Treasurer. In 2025, the Marape government continues to promote this sinkhole program called Connect PNG with no audit, no oversight, and unreported arrears. This program, Mr. Speaker, is the biggest money grab in the history of Papua New Guinea. And a total of 2.6 billion is put into this budget in the capital investment budget for 2025, earmarked for this program. All honourable leaders, Mr. Speaker, have to ask the question, who is benefiting from the Connect PNG program? How many contractors from each of the provinces can claim to be a beneficiary of this program? Mr. Speaker, over many moons we have heard the good Prime Minister spruik the Marape government's exceptional ability to grow GDP. In 2025, GDP is expected to grow by 4.9%, Mr. Speaker. Yet, we simply do not have any figures whatsoever on GDP per capita. Of all the gross domestic product numbers that are being touted by the Marape government, how is this improving the well-being, the quality of living, and the lives of our people in Papua New Guinea? There is absolutely no figures on GDP per capita. In 2024, real GDP grew by 4.7%, taking our total GDP, or the size of our economy, Mr. Speaker, to 122 billion in real numbers. Mr. Speaker, in 5 years, from 2019 to 2024, GDP has grown in real numbers from 82 billion kina to 122 billion, which is around 40 billion in GDP growth. The Marape government has done the following in 5 years. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable House must take critical note of this. In 5 years, the Marape government has borrowed 37 billion kina for purported capital investment projects. Yet, in those same 5 years, the GDP grew by only 40 billion. That's a productive difference of 3 billion kina in 5 years. This is not remarkable, Mr. Speaker, and it is nothing to brag about. In terms of aggregate demand, the total focus of the Marape government has been, in subsequent budgets and in this budget, on increasing borrowings to fuel government spending, with little consideration for consumption through better tax policy, net exports, or investments. We are not a business-friendly government, Mr. Speaker, and we have not been able to create any jobs through private sector investment. Gold is over 2,300 USD an ounce. Cocoa has tripled in price in 3 years, and on it goes. Rather than taking advantage, Mr. Speaker, of this high commodity prices and giving it back to our people, the increased revenues are being used to manage high interest repayments on the excessive debt that we have undertaken. Interest payments are up 15% from 2024 to 2025 and will now equate to 3.5 billion in the budget. Mr. Speaker, interest could really get out of control with inflation pressures on exchange rates, because our external debt, Mr. Speaker, is in USD, for instance, and therefore interest costs in kina might become unmanageable and eat into the budget because we have borrowed in foreign currency. In turn, this will force domestic borrowing costs to increase. In short, Mr. Speaker, we are chasing our tail for money to only spend it on more interest. Now, Mr. Speaker, the crux of the budget and the whole purpose of members of Parliament coming to Parliament to push bills and amendments is so they can effectively obtain the resources they need to develop their districts and provinces. This is public money, Mr. Speaker, and it requires the highest standards, and especially when it comes to telling the truth. Public monies belonging to the people of Papua New Guinea. A question of veracity, Mr. Speaker, will be raised in this next section, and I use the police as a case in point. Mr. Speaker, I remind this Honourable House that the 2025 budget is supposed to translate policy into beneficial outcomes for our people. It is a question of the government's intent and the veracity of its public pronouncements. Sadly, Mr. Speaker, in Papua New Guinea, we are starting to see the proliferation of methamphetamines, cocaine, and other illicit drugs that are a scourge to society and harming our young men and women. So we're all aware, Mr. Speaker, that factory-produced drugs are becoming rampant throughout the country. Yet, Mr. Speaker, in 2024 budget, the National Narcotics Bureau received zero funding. So are we serious about methamphetamines and illicit drugs in our communities when the National Narcotics Bureau received zero funding? Second example, Mr. Speaker, for the police force, the following appropriations were made from 2023 to 2025. In 2025, Mr. Speaker, in 2023, the police force received an appropriation of 515.8 million kina. That's half a billion kina, Mr. Speaker. In 2024, the same police force received 629.8 million kina. That's 0.6 billion, Mr. Speaker. And now in 2025, in line with the theme of securing PNG 2025 and beyond, they've just marginally increased the funding for police to 697.9 million, just under 700 million. So, Mr. Speaker, the question is, police received 1.14 billion kina funding from 2023 to 2024. How has this money being spent, Mr. Speaker? Is the Marape government serious about law and order? Is the cartel and kakistocracy crippling the RPNGC and impeding their effectiveness as a disciplinary force, Mr. Speaker? This money, 1.14 billion kina, could have completely transformed the Royal Papua New Guinea Constabulary and made Papua New Guinea a safer place to live and work. 1.14 billion kina in police funding has vaporized, Mr. Speaker. So where is the money and how was it spent? Mr. Speaker, this Prime Minister makes big statements about equitable distribution and funding to all members of Parliament, including opposition members of Parliament. Mr. Speaker, this is a falsehood and a blatant lie, and this kind of disrespect to the people we represent must stop.